Going to hear from Rich Gagliano, and he's our Senior VP of Marketing, to present an update on the I Love New York and the tourism marketing programs here. And so I think Rich is going to have a presentation. We'll have an opportunity for questions from the board members after that.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, directors. Thank you again for allowing me to be the first of these monthly overviews. So bear with me on the format. I try to keep it as brief as possible, but as informative as possible. Feel free to jump in with questions as I go through this. If I'm going too long, speed me up, play me off, or feel free to ask questions as we go. I don't have to say much about this. I Love New York. The I Love New York logo is one of the state's most well-known and valuable assets. It is an asset. Sometimes people lose sight of that. Although this was created in the 70s as part of the economic redevelopment of New York City to help them through those financial crises back then, it's come to stand for much more than that. It still will always have a connection to New York City, obviously from Dwayne Reed bags and coffee cups, but we try to go much, much, much beyond that. We spent decades trying to go beyond that. We work very closely with New York City and Company, which is New York City's tourism promotion agency. So we work in lockstep with them to make sure all the work that we do at the state level is complementary and supports what they do. But to be clear that the I Love New York logo stands for New York State tourism. New York City is obviously a big part of that, but it's not just New York City. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of resources, again, over the past decades to make sure that that stands for more than just New York City. In terms of the importance of the tourism industry, again, a lot of topics these days are polarizing, but I think there's one topic that everyone would agree on, that tourism is just a key driver in the state. These are just some high-level numbers. Again, you'll see they're from fiscal year 1920, pre-COVID. We'll get into more of that in a second. But before COVID, the tourism industry was responsible for close to 1 million jobs, over 243 million total visits to the state, 65 billion plus in direct spend, and over 114 billion in total economic impact. And these are big numbers, and it's just important to never lose sight of the fact that tourism is an industry as much as manufacturing is, or biotech. I don't want to say people don't think of tourism as an industry, but since as residents and consumers, we interact with it on a day-to-day basis, and hopefully it's fun, you lose sight of the fact that it is a key business driver of the state. So it's a really, really, really important and vital piece of the overall state economy. So just diving a little bit closer into some of those performance numbers. What this first chart shows is the growth that we've made over the past approximate decade. So you'll see of those key drivers, huge growth numbers over the past 10 years. 28% increase over the past decade in visitors, 41% increase in direct spending, 51% increase in overall economic impact, and 33% increase in employment. I should say, I meant to mention this earlier, in terms of employment, I believe tourism is the third largest employer in the state. So again, just important to keep those facts in mind. So huge growth. Again, that growth happened through lots of thoughtful, strategic funding support, marketing efforts. It didn't happen on its own. But then in the year of COVID, I won't dwell on that. We all know, the effects that COVID had on the state overall. But in an industry that relies on public gatherings, it doesn't make travel more difficult. Travel was almost impossible, especially with international travel being locked down from the city. So it wasn't, grocery shopping changed a little bit. And the way we lived our lives became a little bit difficult. Traveling was just, you couldn't do it. Businesses were closed, hotels were shut. It just was tough. So as you can see, the losses that we're seeing during that year were pretty significant. But just to point out, this is state overall. When you break it down by region, it varied a bit. New York City was hit the hardest, and they're still sort of dragging things in terms of international opened up this year as opposed to last year. New York City is a key driver of all these numbers, but certain regions, Adirondacks, we had problems of overcrowding. People were staying more local. People were looking for things to do, go to parks that were open. So what we saw was a lot of people who never hiked before, well, I'll try that hike. I'll put some Tevas on and just walk up there with bags of garbage, not realizing there's not bathrooms up there, and a 4-mile uphill hike is kind of hard. So, and there's not a lot of parking. So we were working with Parks Department and the local regions to make sure that we were sort of load balancing our marketing. And in the year of COVID, since most of these businesses were closed, we scaled back significantly on our marketing investment in terms of dollars. We went more towards unpaid organic. We wanted to keep the brand top of mind and make sure that we were ready to go when things opened up again, but without spending marketing dollars inefficiently. We did some research also. We saw what a lot of other states and cities were doing, and it didn't really fit our needs. For example, Vegas had ads running during COVID saying, we're still here, we're ready for you when you come back. And we were thinking, do we need to do something to keep in the competitive voice? And we did research, and what our research showed was that while consumers couldn't travel, their consideration and their perceptions of New York State and traveling overall stayed where it was, if not increased. People wanted to go. The question was, when would they be ready to go? So, and they also didn't look at COVID as a New York specific or a tourism specific problem. It was just a worldwide global problem. So when things were off, when things were open and ready to go again, people were ready to travel. So we saved a lot of marketing dollars during that period. Like I said, did more organic work, and we geared up for the big comeback. Luckily, a year later, the vaccines were out, businesses started to open up again, and the first year back, we've made some significant inroads in terms of getting back to those peaks. Still not quite there yet. As you can see, one of the interesting stats is, if you can see the visitors, we're only 6% below our peak, but the spending is still a bit below that. What that indicates potentially, and this is just sort of theory, is that there are still more visitors coming, but we haven't gotten those long haul international people coming to New York City for a week with the high spend. So that's going to come back. We've been working with New York City and Company, and I think they are either on or ahead of forecast to get back to pre-COVID New York City peak numbers. So we're heading in the right direction. And some of the marketing initiatives that that I mentioned before, we didn't really need to change our strategy. This is the core principles of our marketing strategy pre-COVID. And again, like I said, our research indicated that there really wasn't much of a need to change that drastically. Our core target is the high family, like I just mentioned, the high family leisure travel target. Those who travel with multiple people, stay for longer trips. It's not that we only focus on them, but that's our core. We've been getting a little bit more into younger travelers, single travelers, segment marketing to different groups, but the core is still our long-term family travel. And our key target is within New York State and within our neighboring states. One of the things we did last year, but we're testing, we expanded a bit more into the international market. I'll talk more about that later. And we also ran some consumer marketing in the longer haul markets. So LA, San Francisco, Chicago. I'll show you some work that we did that was specific for that longer haul market, but that was something that we expanded into this year to be a bit more aggressive to help stem the comeback. From a messaging perspective, again, we try to promote the state overall. As you'll see in a lot of our TV ads and our campaigns, it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. And we say we don't promote travel to any specific destination, we promote the state, yet we use specific attractions as examples. For example, we would never spend state dollars to promote go to Legoland. Here's a coupon, 2-for-1. Legoland will manage their own marketing, but using Legoland as an example of some of the great attractions that the state has to offer, we will feature that. I'm using that as an example of something we featured most recently this summer. So we do focus on specific attractions, but we try to spread them out as much as possible to show the variety across the regions. And then from an integrated approach, we do not book hotels on our site. We don't drive plane tickets. We're not at the level of retail execution, but we do try to provide tools and information and content that help you plan your trip as efficiently as possible to quickly get you from our messaging and our environment out to an attraction to actually book a ticket and spend your dollars. And again, I won't go through all these in detail, but this is just an overview of how we measure our marketing performance. Like I said, since we do not book hotels and we can't track our success from a marketing perspective on specific revenue coming through the system, we have an in-market survey that surveys our core target audience throughout the year, and we measure levels of consideration, perception, awareness, just what people are feeling pre and post when experiencing our campaigns. And what this basically shows is when we put these surveys out, one of the questions we ask is, are you aware of our campaign or are you unaware of our campaign? We separate those respondents into two separate buckets and then continue to ask them the same series of questions. When you compare those in the aware of our campaign bucket to those in the unaware, there are significant differences in terms of consideration, enthusiasm, and some key drivers that our research shows are factors in people choosing a vacation destination. So what that basically says, in sort of easiest terms, is those who experience our campaign have a higher consideration. Therefore, let's get more people exposed to the campaign. Way oversimplification of that, but that's one of the key measures of how we measure the effectiveness of our marketing. And the chart on the right shows we asked the same survey questions to all of our respondents about our neighboring competitive markets, and New York State, New York City consistently beat out our neighboring friends. So that's it for the numbers. Now, as a marketing person, one of the reasons I got into marketing was to do the fun stuff. So from here on in, no more charts, no more numbers. I want to show some high-level examples of some of the work that we do that result in those numbers. I'll get back to the TV in a second, but like I mentioned before, typically we would go out with statewide messaging, and we market to people in the state, to our neighboring drive markets, and we try to feature as many regions and attractions across the state. This year, to be a bit more aggressive, we ventured out to more longer haul markets. So when you see the creative, you'll see a slight difference where we feature more of the most iconic, well-known locations versus more of the specific things we have in state. And I'll play those in a minute. In addition to TV, I know TV is probably the most recognizable and spotlighted asset, but it's not just the television. We've got a huge digital footprint. We're on all the key social channels. We spend smart investments on paid search, which really identifies those hand raisers, people who are already looking for a vacation, searching. We then push them to our content versus the more visual elements that kind of drive you to our site and try to convince you to choose New York versus someone else. From a PR perspective, a lot of you recognize our friend Ross. Ross is our Vice President and Executive Director of Tourism. He's frequently the face of I Love New York, local news, quotes, interviews, articles. From a PR perspective, we've got a huge footprint there. I'm sorry, let me just play those spots right now. So the first spot I'm going to play is the one that was made for the long haul. We're just calling it Best Of. So again, it features more of the most iconic, well-known, beautiful visuals to try to get someone to book a trip, a long haul, book a flight.
There's something for everyone in New York State. Because some of the best experiences in New York also happen to be some of the best experiences in the world. Plan your New York State summer vacation at iloveny.com/summer.
And then the second spot, this is one that runs more, within state, within our drive market. So similar message promoting the state overall, but using more, let's say, localized examples as opposed to the big marquee attractions.
It's time for an unforgettable New York summer.
It's a summertime thing. It's a summertime thing. Summertime thing. It's a summertime thing.
Find your summertime thing in New York. Plan it all at iloveny.com/summer.
So unfortunately, I have not experienced all of these yet, but I need to get up to the jet boats sometime soon. Real quick, from a digital perspective, again, obviously, ilovenewyork.com, our social footprint, digital promotions, the website is really the sort of centerpiece of all we talk about. The commercials do a good job of getting you, interested and piquing your interest, but then we drive you to the site where you've got the deep content on all the regions, all the different attractions, blog pages, 7 million people visit a year. I think that's a 60% increase from the year before. On social, we're on all the key channels. I don't know how many of you in this room are on TikTok. I'm learning about it myself, but we are on TikTok this year, so ask your kids to follow us. And we do a series of digital promotions each year too. We do things. We do a March Madness promotion where it's a bracketed type, March Madness, similar to the basketball tournament where we pit attractions against each other. But we have a bracket of like favorite beaches and favorite golf courses, and we come up with a winner. But our most popular digital promotion each year, right now we're in the middle of it, is the Fall Foliage Report. You can sign up, and we've got a weekly report that shows you where, the different levels of fall foliage from beginning to midpoint to peak. We update that on a weekly basis. We've got, I think, about 85 what we call leaf peepers, volunteers around the state who just call in their reports of what leaves are looking like. We compile that. It goes out each week. Last year, that promotion alone attracted 725,000 people, and this year, we're a few weeks into it. We've already got 500,000. And then from an experiential marketing perspective, what we do with experiential is try to bring our story and engagement out to you. So each summer we have what we call our mobile tour. We show up at various concerts, food festivals, street fairs, any kind of relevant event that's gathering a crowd, and we set up our I Love New York footprint where it's got interactive kiosks and games. You can win prizes. This is a picture of our presence this year at the State Fair, which was one of our most interactive and most digital-based attractions. We also do a similar tour, the LGBTQ tour, where it's, again, we set up this year with 6 different stops. That's a picture, I think, from the Buffalo one, where you could get your aura read. I don't know. People were lined up to engage with it. I think the governor actually did it at one of the stops. And then we also oversee the marketing aspects of the welcome centers. The 11 welcome centers across the region. They in total see about 2 million people a year. In those welcome centers, you can purchase Taste New York products and also engage with, I guess, a smaller scale from our footprint, but digital interactive kiosks, tourism information. And if you haven't seen them, they're really beautiful buildings. There's one in each region. And then behind the scenes, I would say, well, last but not least, but one of the important drivers that we also oversee is support within the industry. So from a funding perspective, we have a number of funding and grant programs. Market New York and matching funds have been around for years. This year, we were just awarded over $40 million over the next 4 or 5 years, I think it is, from the federal EDA awards, 14 of which we're going to be giving out in sub-awards to different regions. From an international perspective, we've got 4 offices around the world. What we do is work with them to help create tourism packages. In the international markets, there's still that propensity for consumers to go to a travel agent and book a package trip. So we work with them to help create package tours. We're doing a little bit more with them now in terms of consumer marketing. And from an education and workforce standpoint, we are always talking to the industry, webinars on trends, opportunities, best practices, working very closely with DOL in terms of job workforce training programs, anything we can do to keep the industry, supported and alive, especially now. These are all not new post-COVID. These are all things that have been in place. We've just kind of amped it up a bit post-COVID to make sure the industry is coming back as strong as possible. And just a quick, not as long as list as Kevin's, but just a quick shout out to some key members on the team. We can't list everyone, but I just want to call out Ross Levi, who's our Vice President, Executive Director of Tourism, Anna Packman, our Vice President of Digital Marketing, Shanique Costin, our Vice President of Experiential Marketing, and Mark Hamilton and Rick McChung from our Creative Services. So if there's any questions?
Okay. Rich, that was terrific, thanks. And yeah, I'll start off with a couple, just on the second to last slide there. The 4 offices internationally, do we actually have ESD employees in those countries?
We outsource. It's we partner with marketing agencies, marketing firms that specialize in international tourism. So we call it the I Love New York office, but it's essentially an outsource to an agency.
Got it. And then with your, say, 2019 stats, pre-COVID, when we had about 243 million visitors, is that something that can be broken down? Are most of the tourists in New York, New Yorkers doing staycations throughout different parts of the state? And international, what percentage of the tourism comes from international?
Yeah, we can break all that down. I can follow up and give you a more.
I'm just curious. Most of our tourists, are they New Yorkers or are they from New Jersey and Connecticut?
Hey, Rich.
Yep.
To Ross Levi. Hi, Kevin and everyone.
Hi.
I would just mention that along that in-state, out-of-state split, generally New York is similar to other states where roughly 2/3 of our travel is within state, and then the rest of that is outside the state. That actually is sort of interesting and maybe counterintuitive. I think most people people think that, your job in tourism is to bring people exclusively from out of state. But a lot of time you're actually just competing with a couch. You're just trying to get people out into the world. So that's broadly speaking the split here in New York State, which is, like I said, similar to every other state as well.
That was helpful. Thanks, Levi.
And
That's
that's what-
exactly what I was asking.
And that's why one of our, our core, strategic principles was we market within state and within drive markets. And we really haven't done a ton pre-COVID in terms of the longer distance, but to sort of get things back as quickly as possible. We explored that this year. We're still looking at the results of how effective those longer haul messages were, and international, same thing. We didn't invest a ton internationally because up until this year, you physically couldn't travel international back into the city. So now that's opened up again, we're working with New York City and company to see, what the right mix is, not deviating too much from the strategy that we know has worked in the past, but how can we sort of bring things back as quick as possible by expanding that audience.
Great, thanks, Rich.
Just
Rob?
taking that one step further, of the roughly third of the visitors that come from out of state, what percentage of those are international? How large a proportion of the out of state visitation is the international travel?
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't know the percent. Ross, do you know the exact percentage of international versus domestic?
It's actually, I don't know the actual percentages. It's on the small side, but it's actually about a third of the tourist spend. So even though the number of visitors is small, the international is so important because 1/3 of the economic development, the money that is spent by tourism, comes from international. So it's a really important market for us.
Right, and that's where you can see probably in the return of visitors, there's not a lot of the international return, hence the bigger gap in revenue coming in. So
Makes sense.
that's the thing, we get that family of 5 coming in from UK for 10 days in New York City. That's, a lot more than a weekend camping, so.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other board members have any questions for Rich? Well,
Every time that someone asks me, where are you from? I say, I'm from New York. Immediately they think that is New York City. They said, no, I'm from Rochester. Oh, where is that? So do you have local offices in the different cities?
We work closely, as I Love New York, we work closely with the different regions and counties, and all the different regions and counties have what we call TPAs, tourism promotion agencies, and we work with them very closely.
Yeah.
They work with us, whether it's grant support or, I said before, the industry support, but we work very closely with all those regions. Because that's the point, is to go beyond New York City, not to ignore New York City, especially now post-COVID when they need as much help as possible, but to let everyone know New York is not just New York City. And we have it's a good problem to have that New York tourism does not rely on one type of activity. It's not just about outdoors. It's not just about culture. It's got all those things. It's got
Yeah.
the best. We got the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Festivals, we got festivals
Right.
in Rochester. We got the Lilac Festival. You're all invited. People come from all over.
don't you have tulips
for
too?
that. Yeah, well, yes.
I've been to the Tulip Festival of there.
Okay. So you're all invited. Come to Rochester. And Syracuse too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very
Right.
good.
That's one of the things we try to do is how do we, we have this wealth of content. How do we best serve it up to people? Because there's a lot of things out there that people may not know about. Everything from a small, a flower festival all the way up to Niagara Falls and everything in between. So how do we best target people, use our marketing dollars as efficiently and wisely as possible, all resulting in someone, whether it's a long weekend or a 15-day trip across the state.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, Rich, thanks to you and your team. That was very informative and.